Good morning or evening, friend. Here's your friendly announcer. I have serious news to pass on to everybody. What I'm about to say could mean the world's disaster. Could change your joy and laughter to tears and pain. It's that love in need of love today. Don't delay, send yours in right away. Hey, going round, breaking many hearts. Stop it, please, before it's gone too far. The force of evil plan to make you its possession, and it will if we let it destroy everybody. We all must take precautionary measures. If love and peace you treasure, then you'll hear me when I say, oh, oh, that love in need of love today. Don't delay, send yours in right away. Hey, hey, going round, breaking many hearts. No, 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 no. Yeah. Yeah. Da, 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 no, 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 no. Oh, oh, oh. The world is not. Yellow fever. Yellow fever. Just give the world.
Hey y'all, what's up? How I sound? I hope I sound good. Let me check. Hey y'all, what's up? Yeah, I'm sounding good. All right, we can get busy. All right, so I am back. Let me get a little sip of something. Happy Friday night. Just about to be Saturday morning. End of a long work week. But we're going to get to chapter 39. And we're going to start from there. Ooh, Lord, we further in the book than I realized. I did a lot of reading. It's only 55 chapters. All right, so chapter 39 is titled Feeling Left Out. It was springtime and love was in the air. Motown was discussing us going abroad for a promotional tour. We all needed passports and soon. The promotional tour would start within the next few months. Motown was busy securing passports for us to travel outside of the country. This was not the only thing going on in our lives. I was hearing rumors about Elle and Roberta getting married. I did not pay the rumors any mind. After all, Elle was my brother and would certainly come to me if the rumors were true. We had seen each other often lately, and he never mentioned anything about getting married. One second. I did not know he and Roberta were headed back to Grand Rapids for a visit. For whatever reason, he and Roberta had decided to pay a visit to Grand Rapids. I figured marriage would be too important not to mention. Elle and Roberta eventually arrived in Grand Rapids for what I gathered was a mini vacation away from the hustle and bustle of Los Angeles. I thought nothing of their visit until I received a phone call from Mama. Mama wanted me to know that Elle was planning a wedding. He had surprised everyone and let them know of his impending nuptials. His visit to Grand Rapids was not to get away, but to plan a wedding. He was adamant about the wedding taking place in Grand Rapids and wanted Uncle Bill to officiate the ceremony. The wedding was also a surprise to the bride-to-be. Roberta had no idea Elle was planning their wedding. Everyone involved had to move quickly with planning the ceremony. Wedding invitations were printed and sent out to people everywhere. Guess what? I was not invited. I did not receive an invitation by mail nor a phone call inviting me to the ceremony. Did I say that Elle was whipped in the last reading section? Well, if I didn't say it then, I'm going to say it now. Elle was whipped. Once Roberta and Elle arrived in Grand Rapids, he surprised her by taking her to buy a wedding dress. Her mother did not have to do anything for the wedding except show up. Elle paid all the expenses for the wedding. He even sent for her mother and other family members. He flew them all to Grand Rapids to take part in the wedding. What a great day for Grand Rapids to witness the star, Elle Debarge, being joined in holy matrimony. What a sad day for me not to be able to witness my brother tie the knot. I did not even receive a phone call. The rejection hurt deep. Everyone talked about how Elle went out of his way and spared no expense for the wedding. He did whatever it took to make the wedding day a success. Knowing my brother and the great romantic person he was, I knew he would go all out. Sadly, his wedding day marked the beginning of his own personal hell. To say Roberta was very difficult to please would be an understatement. Nothing Elle did could satisfy his bride, and they were constantly arguing. In fact, it was reported the couple argued all the way up the aisle. This did not surprise me at all. I was sad Elle had to endure Roberta's wrath. I wanted to be there for moral support, if nothing else. I tried to convince myself I was okay not being invited. A small voice wanted me to believe that had I been invited, I would not have shown up anyway. Deep down inside, I knew it was a lie to make myself feel better because I was truly hurt. Elle and I were close. No matter what I felt about Roberta, I would have made it a point to be at his wedding. The day of the wedding, I found myself very emotional. I never shared with anyone the tears I shed. A part of me still believed Elle was going to call and invite me to the wedding. He was my brother, and he had to know I was hurting. Sitting in LA, knowing my brother was getting married, I tried to imagine what was going through his mind. I hated Roberta for him, and he knew it. In fact, she knew of my hatred toward her because I was never afraid to voice it. Well, what'd you say? I hate you, bitch. When I really looked back on the entire situation, Elle caused me to dislike Roberta. There was nothing personally against her other than her callous treatment of my brother. Girls like her came a dime a dozen. What was funny was that I probably would not have had a problem with her had Elle not shared details of their tumultuous relationship. But he was my brother and confided in me. He shared with me what they were going through, always telling me specific things she would do to undermine the relationship. Knowing intimate details about their relationship caused me to form an opinion. Of course, I was going to take my brother's side. Elle painted her in my mind, and I thought it was unfair he still loved her while fostering my hatred of her simultaneously. Now, the dichotomy in how he felt versus how I felt had somehow put a wedge between our sibling relationship. I was sad and grieving. Through it all, I loved my brother. Elle was always very special to me. His place in my heart was irreplaceable, and I found it to be a slap in the face for him not to invite me to his wedding. The moment Roberta came into his life, Elle changed. He was no longer the brother I once knew so well. I missed the brother I knew to be warm, kind, and considerate. We did many things together, so it was unlike him not to invite me to his wedding. He was very much part of my life, not only as a little brother and group member. Rather, Elle and I shared a spiritual bond as well. I thought of the Bible and how in the days of Moses, his sister Miriam did not approve of the woman he was marrying. I felt Moses and Miriam were much like Elle and me. In fact, Elle would often refer to me as Miriam, and I would refer to him as Moses. We both looked at it as our purpose. I missed our spiritual talks and working together in the business. I missed how we were as brother and sister. I felt the relationship with Roberta had taken my brother away from me, and I was angry about it. Roberta made Elle do crazy things to satisfy her demanding attitude. She wanted to be a star, and he wanted to act as if he could make her one. Deep down in his heart, he knew Roberta lacked star quality. Nevertheless, I had to understand in Elle's mind that she was a star. She was something different in my mind. I remember telling Elle she was a witch from hell, and she only came into his life to break him. Further, she was an emissary of the devil who came to destroy him. I told him this often. Perhaps this is why he did not invite me to the wedding. Maybe he felt I would not be nice to Roberta. I was driving myself mad trying to come up with different scenarios. Whatever the reason, I was still in California. A wedding was happening in Grand Rapids, and my feelings were hurt. A part of me felt my brother was in big trouble. People continued calling me the day of the wedding and the next day. I had to make up excuse after excuse as to why I did not attend my brother's wedding. Then there were those who were close enough to know what was really happening behind the scenes. I was hearing all about the wedding secondhand and having a hard time dealing with it. I could not believe Elle would just leave me out. It was not as if we were arguing or on bad terms per se. Maybe he thought I would speak now and not be able to hold my peace since I knew how stressful the relationship was for him. I witnessed the hell Roberta put him through. He confided in me when things between them became too unbearable. I knew from the very start their relationship was a mistake. Roberta did not reciprocate my brother's love and affection. I then thought about the son they shared together. Elle had no more fears of little Elle not being his son, and he wanted to be a good father. He wanted to have a good relationship with his son. And I finally had to stop the pity party and find peace amid the storm. Life goes on. All I could do was pray he could get through this time in his life. As I prayed, I asked God to give me peace, which surpasses all understanding. I would not worry about it anymore. It was over. And at the end of the day, it was his life and his mistake to make. I had my own life worries and was growing weary worrying about everyone else. I could not deal with myself for dealing with my brothers. I had always put everyone else, especially my siblings, before me, and it was time for things to change. Chapter 40, Headed Abroad. A meeting was scheduled at Motown in Tony Jones's office, and all three managers were to be present. Suzanne DePass, Tony Jones, and Suzanne Costin. We would be discussing the trip to London. I arrived at the scheduled time only to find Ellen and Roberta seated in the office along with Tony Jones. The other group members had not yet arrived. I had not seen Ellen and Roberta since they returned from Grand Rapids. I was surprised Elle even brought Roberta to the meeting. I get they were a married couple now. However, it did not mean she was married to the group. I held my composure. I figured there was nothing wrong with her being there for the moment. After all, the other group members had not yet arrived. I walked over to where they were seated and stated very nicely, "Well, hello, newlyweds. Congratulations." I would normally follow my compliment with a hug. However, I was not feeling them and felt my acknowledgement was enough. They both there sat there they both sat there looking silly. Finally, they stated in unison, "Thank you." I then took my seat. but was fuming inside. Tony Jones knew it and was making small talk to break the tension. I was doing good hiding my disgust of the couple. Tony Jones just kept talking, asking questions, going over who had IDs, etc. I knew Tony was trying to keep the tension in check. I answered his questions to the best of my ability. Suddenly, there was a ruckus going on in the secretary's office outside Tony Jones's door. The rest of the gang had arrived. Tony Jones got on his phone and let Suzanne DePass and Suzanne Costin know we were ready to start the meeting. After their arrival, I expected Roberta to get up and leave. However, she pulled out a pen and pad and began jotting down notes. Roberta stayed throughout the entire meeting. It was sickening to me. I felt she was out of place and should not be in our meeting. However, she was there because she's Elle's wife and apparently his secretary. We discussed the Rhythm of the Night video and how the movie The Last Dragon was coming along. They saw it to be something big for Debarge and thought the video was coming along just fine. They were now editing the footage for the movie. They went on to explain how our popularity was exploding overseas. There was a demand for us over there, and they felt it was a good time for Debarge to make their presence known abroad. We had done our promotional tour in the States, and it was successful. They were now setting up the promotional tour abroad, and all we needed was for everyone's passports to arrive. Since it was such short notice, they had to find someone who could get it done right away. They did some under the table magic to make it happen. And when they had to see doctors to get physicals, we then had to see doctors to get physicals and shots. There were 2 weeks left before we were set to leave. And after everything was discussed, the meeting adjourned. Before leaving the office, Tony Jones stated, "By the way, Mrs. Bunny, I have a present for you. It is something I know you will love." He handed me a book. It's Marvin Gaye's life story. He stated, "I know you're a big fan of his." I was ecstatic. The title of the book was Divided Soul, The Life of Marvin Gaye, and David Ritz was the author. I was thrilled. It was a wonderful gift, and it took my mind off Roberta for a moment. Since Tony Jones and I were the only ones left in the office, I was able to openly voice my opinion about her being in the meeting. I had to say what was on my mind to someone because it was eating me up inside. After listening to me, Tony Jones reassured me the group was on to bigger and better things. He did not want me to let little things like Roberta bother me. Then Tony stated, "I knew you were upset, which is why I gave you the book today. I was saving it to give to you on the plane. It's such a long flight and you would need something to read." I could not thank Tony enough. He did pick the right time. I was a little down and a book made my day. I ran out of the office wanting to get home so I could start reading about the man whom I admired so much. I loved his music, and so did my brothers. The title of the book captivated me and spoke so much to how I was feeling. I had to know what tormented such a gifted singer. I started reading the book as soon as I got home and found it hard to put down. My husband Tony would not be going on the road with me this time. Well, I hope you ain't leaving the girls with him. Therefore, the children would be staying with him. Love's in need of love today. Don't delay. Send yours in right away. Lord help me, Jesus, to get through this book. My baby Tony was now 8 months old and actively trying to walk. I missed her already, even though we had not yet left. However, this was my job and how I provided for my family. Tony went and got me enough pills to where I would not get sick while away. I had them stored in a pill bottle with my name on it and was able to hide them in my suitcase. Our passports finally arrived along with shot records. We were finally on our way to Europe. The flight was the longest flight we had ever taken. We flew to New York first and then went through customs. This took a while, so I pulled out my book on Marvin Gaye and started reading it again. It kept my interest the entire time. Finally, we were seated on the plane and on our way to London. We all sat together in first class. It was a lovely experience with lots of legroom. We also had access to the bar. I did not drink but took some pills as I sat there reading. I was in heaven as I vicariously walked through Marvin Gaye's life story. It was so exciting learning about his idiosyncrasies. I kept sharing everything I learned and discovered about him with my brothers. The trip became a family affair. We decided to put everything behind us and pull together as one. We vowed to not let anything come between us as a family and as a group while in Europe. Tony Jones, Skip Starkey, along with Bobby Reed, accompanied us. Security would meet us once we arrived in London. It took 11 hours to travel from New York to London. It did not bother me since I had my pills and book to help me break the monotony. The Motown staff in London greeted us at the airport, replete with limos and all the bells and whistles. Before our day started, we had to go through customs, which took a while. And finally, we were off to the hotel to rest. London was beautiful, but much different than the States. There was also a major time difference. It was something we needed to adjust to quickly. During the nighttime, we were not sleepy because technically it was our daytime. Therefore, we stayed up reminiscing, marveling how far we had come in life, and about all the fun we did manage to have as children. Wait a minute. Let me start that sentence again. Therefore, we stayed up reminiscing, marveling how far we had come in life, and about all the fun we did manage to have as children, despite everything that took place. When we were not acting silly, I was into my book. I had started reading it aloud to my brothers. We all saw Marvin as someone we could very much relate to. It was no wonder his music touched our hearts. We now understood why the book was entitled Divided Soul. Hello. Yeah, it's like she's in denial about him being a pedophile, like it just never happened. Why, thank you, Robert. While on our weekend break, security accompanied us on a shopping trip. Elle bought me a little statue of a bunny with the bottom reading, My Bunnykin. I was very surprised about his kind gesture. It was a special moment between us and represented our closeness. Since the fallout from the wedding, there was distance between us. We did not talk about the wedding or what was bothering us about each other. We just told each other how much we loved each other and held each other for a moment. Meanwhile, I was reading my book at every opportunity. Now I was having to read aloud to Elle, who had become enthralled in the saga of Marvin's life. He loved how the story was unfolding and would come to me whenever I was reading. He would instruct me to read it aloud to him. Elle and I were huge fans of Marvin, so I obliged. It was interesting to read about the struggles Marvin had gone through. It let us know we were not alone and there was someone else out there with a shared experience. The weekend was over and it was time to work. By this time, I was missing my family deeply. I did not have a chance to talk to them yet. Tony Jones had promised we could call home later in the day. It would be after our media appearances. I mentally prepared myself for the day ahead and topped it off by taking my pills. I only used enough to not get sick. I was mindful that Tony, my husband, had only given me enough to last the duration of the trip. We had many more days ahead of us, and I had to take the right amount or I would be in deep trouble. I did not want to go through withdrawal, so I was being extra careful not to go over the amount by even one pill. The boys, Randy, Mark, and James, were showing signs of getting sick. However, they seemed to be dealing with it as best they could under the circumstances. I was not able to share any of my pills with them because my husband ensured I had enough for only me. I did not talk with them before we left the state, so I was not able to ensure they had enough to last the duration of the promotional tour. In fact, I was still under the impression they did not have a habit as big as mine, or they may have decided to go cold turkey in London. The thought of not using the pills during this time in my life was a bit scary. The pills kept me well, so I only took enough to not get sick. My brothers must have known I had a supply of pills somewhere. They knew about my habit and was wondering why I was not getting sick. However, I played it cool and did not show signs of being high. I behaved normal and did not take more pills than were needed. I did not want them to start badgering me for my supply. The first official day of the promotional tour was grueling, but we made it through. We did radio stations and some TV appearances before turning in for the night. Tony Jones made sure we talked with our families back home before we went to bed. The next day, I did not use any pills since I felt okay and had decided to wait until later to take them. We went on about our day and visited more radio stations, more made in store appearances, and did more TV appearances. After eating, we went back to our apartment. I was feeling sick and went to my room to get my pills only to find they were not where I had placed them. I panicked. I took everything out of my suitcases and meticulously went through each piece of my belongings. I was becoming overwhelmed and felt someone had to have gone through my suitcase and took the pills. I knew where I put my pills and could not find them anywhere. At this point, I was getting very agitated, so I went into the living room where the boys had congregated. I asked point blank, which one of you have my pills? They all looked at me as if I was crazy, and not one of them admitted to anything. I became furious. Come on now. Don't play with me. You all know I need my pills. I know where I put them, and they're not hid here now. They all claimed not to have any idea I even had pills, and they had dared not to enter my room. I knew they were lying, and one of them, if not all of them, knew what happened to my pills. Yet none of them were forthcoming, and this made me even angrier. Mark made a statement that led me to suspect he was the culprit. Whoever did this did not have the decency to take some and leave some. Rather, the culprit or culprits took them all. Okay, I threatened. I better not see one of you nod, not one time. If I must stay up all night and watch you, I will. I made it a point to let Marty know I was on to him without saying his name. Randy and James were amused and found it hilarious when I sat up all night and watched Marty. I made sure he did not close his eyes, not even for a minute. Marty seemed oblivious to everything, but Randy and James knew what was going on and had fun at his expense. The next morning, Randy, bless his heart, went to the dentist hoping to get some pills to help me get through. Randy knew I was getting sick. He got up early and acted as if he had a bad toothache and needed some pain pills. He did manage to get a prescription, and it helped a little. However, I ended up all the way in London, sick and having to withdraw cold turkey. I was not looking forward to the cranky days and sleepless nights. We did a week's worth of promotional work in London and then were off to Luxembourg. Going to Luxembourg was amazing because I was at the point in the book where Marvin Gaye was in Luxembourg as well. I imagined I was there with him. Luxembourg was beautiful. However, I felt a sense of imprisonment during my stay. I learned it was a privilege to be from the land of free. I also learned we had die-hard fans in Europe. From reading his book, Marvin stated that fans in the States are borrowed and you are only as big as your last hit. On the contrary, Europeans are fans forever. Marvin talked about how much he enjoyed his stay in Europe. He felt the need to leave the States, and Europe brought him a sense of freedom. However, I felt a lack of freedom, especially since we could not go anywhere by ourselves. Security was with us each time we stepped outside of our living quarters. We were hopping in and out of limos for the most part whenever we did leave the apartment. I needed air to breathe. The city was beautiful, and I wanted to experience it up close and personal. I wanted to take a walk solo around the city. Even during our day off, security tagged along with us on our walk around Luxembourg. It was such a beautiful day for walking, and we were in such happy moods. We began singing and took a trip down memory lane by singing songs off Marvin Gaye's iconic album, What's Going On. We broke out into the different harmony parts and felt we were doing Marvin justice with our impromptu concert. We continued singing and harmonizing until lunchtime. We came upon a cute little cafe where we could all sit outside and eat. After lunch, we went back to our hotel and prepared for the next day's itinerary. Our next stop was Germany. Germany was quite the experience, especially the language barrier. We found the language difficult to decipher, even when they spoke English. People would say to us, "Have a nice day," and it sounded as if they said a curse word. By the time we reached Germany, we were missing home and exhausted from working. Touring Europe proved to be much different than touring back home. We were so far away from home and longing for our loved ones. It had now been 6 weeks since we left for the promotional tour. Apparently, something was up, and Elle called a family meeting. There would be no manager present during the meeting. I'm surprised Roberta didn't go. According to Elle, the money Motown was spending on a promotional tour was money Debarge had earned. Elle began to break everything down to where we could understand. All the money being spent on a European promotional tour was money we all had to pay back before we could recoup anything from album sales. Any amount of money spent was money owed to the company. Management never shared that the group had control over what was spent, where we spent it, how we spent it, and with whom we spent it on. Elle was now bringing everything to light. "We don't even know how much we spent already," he informed us. "We have not kept up with a single receipt. They can say whatever they want to say." Elle went on to educate us about what was happening. They hire whoever they want. However, Why can't we just hire our own people instead? Let's go home. They have not been right with us, he stated. We took a vote, and it was unanimous. We all voted to go home. We went to Tony Jones, and L talked on our behalf. We are ready to go home now, he boldly stated. We went off this tour. There are some things we are not pleased with, and we did not sit down with the company and talk when and what? And we need to sit down with the company and talk when we get back to the States. Tony Jones then told us he needs to call Mr. Gordy and tell him our thoughts and plans. We went back to our hotel and waited for his call. We thought Mr. Jones would get back to us right away. However, time went by and we heard nothing. We then decided to call his room and received no answer. We called the other rooms and there was no answer as well. This was a cause for concern. It appears they were deliberately trying to ignore us, and we were pissed. Tony Jones was supposed to call Mr. Gordy, then get back with us. We began to doubt he had even called Mr. Gordy. Did he think we were a joke? They out there doing whatever they want to do, Elle stated emphatically. They're probably out spending more of our money with no receipts. Let's go home. We have our own airline tickets, and we can book our own flights out of here. We tried in vain all night long to get in touch with management and still received no answer. We followed Elle's lead and called the airline and booked flights for the next morning. Elle called Tony and finally managed to get him on the phone. He informed Tony we would be leaving on a flight in a few hours. I guess Tony realized the seriousness of the situation and put a call to Mr. Gordy. We were not privy to their conversation. However, one thing was fact. We would be heading home with or without anyone's approval. The next morning, we woke up determined to leave the hotel before management could put a halt to our plans to return home. The boys even got into a rumble with the road manager, Bobby Reed. Even with all the commotion, we were determined not to miss our plane. After boarding the plane, Elle went in on Tony Jones. He demanded a receipt for every dime he spent on the group only. Tony acted as if he didn't understand Elle's demands. This only served to piss Elle off even more. We stood behind our brother and knew he was looking out for the group's best interests. It was a long ride home. I became lost in my thoughts. It was the only way I could survive the flight. Time seemed to drag on. There was nothing to preoccupy my time since I had finished the book and had no pills. Before leaving Europe, I had called my husband and told him what was unfolding and to expect me home soon. He knew to have some pills ready once I arrived at the airport. The boys asked my husband to have them some pills ready too. We finally touched ground in Los Angeles. Of course, it took forever to get through customs. It appears customs was deliberately going through our luggage with a fine-toothed comb. My husband Tony was there to greet us, and we now had access to pills. It felt good to be home. We all went our separate ways to be with our loved ones. As Elle was leaving, he let us know he would get to the bottom of everything with Motown and our management. I miss my children so much, more than I had ever missed them before. Tony was now walking, and I was tickled pink watching her taking tiny little steps. 6 weeks had gone by, and I had missed so much at home. I was glad we left when we did. Had we decided against leaving, our stay in Europe would have been much longer. I had so much to share with them and a lot of catching up to do. I realized if I ever visited Europe again, I would take my family on a vacation. I would not go for work again. And although where we visited was beautiful and stunning, We were constantly surrounded by security and could not enjoy the scenery. Plus, it was too far away from my children, and I was lonely for them. Chapter 41. L takes the lead. Well, shoot, at least he wasn't whipped by Motown and Berry Gordy. Good for him. All right, this will be the last chapter to read for this session. Okay. Once we arrived back in the States from Europe, L began negotiations right away with Motown. He brought forth our grievances to the company. He demanded the company negotiate new contracts and had his newly hired lawyer draft a more equitable partnership. L advised us all to hire our own lawyers independent of the company. We got right on it and did as we were told. With L handling the business side of the group, everything appeared to be on the up and up this time around. Debarge even hired a manager to specifically take care of all business matters concerning the group. His name was Fred Moultrie. In addition to becoming our new business manager, Fred Moultrie also took the lead and began managing the group. This was a welcome relief. No longer did we have to deal with Tony Jones and his crappy games. Mr. Moultrie promised transparency and to keep us in the loop as to whatever was going on. It was indeed a brand new day with the company. We were all excited about getting new contracts. However, with the new contracts came division within the group. Does anything just ever go smooth? Always some bullshit. I don't know how they had time for that. The new contracts increased our salaries considerably, and even though we were earning more, each person was put on a different pay scale. Unlike the first contract we signed, which split the earnings equally, this time around, things were different. Each lawyer was tasked with negotiating the worth of their client to Motown and Fred Moultrie. Basically, everything boiled down to each person being compensated according to their individual value to the company. Therefore, it was a no-brainer when L ended up with the most lucrative contract. After all, he was more in demand by the company than the rest of the group members, including myself. After L, I would become the second highest earner in the group. Of course, I did not earn as much as L, but I was satisfied with the financial terms of my new contract. Randy, Mark, and James were placed on the same pay scale. Their earnings were the same and lower than both L and me. The three of them were furious. Oddly enough, they were not so much furious about L's contract as they were about mine. They did not understand why my earnings were higher and voiced how I should be making the same pay as the three of them. Tony Jones stepped in and tried in vain to explain the salary disparities. According to Motown, I was more valuable to the company as a songwriter as well as an artist and producer based on my work on previous albums. I had written more songs than the three of them and had the catalog as proof. It was not about anyone being a better writer. Rather, I just had more songs, which made me more in demand, hence the higher salary. Even after everything was explained ad nauseum, my brothers were still dissatisfied. I now had a target on my back and became a source of contention in the group. I explained everything to my brothers repeatedly, but our relationship had become very contentious. They acted as though they finally understood the financial decisions made when in my presence. However, Behind my back, I was considered a dirty dog. Yet, there was still no bad blood between them and L. The upheaval my new contract caused had gotten so bad I had to mentally tune out their harsh and threatening criticisms. I began to no longer care what they said or thought. At first, their words were getting under my skin. As the oldest, and because I loved them dearly, I wanted them to understand why everything happened the way it did. They did not care to understand. It was just easier to disparage me by talking about the terms of my contract to everyone in our circle. The verbal hostility was nonstop until it got to Bobby's ear. Once Bobby intervened, things simmered down for a moment. Bobby had just returned to Los Angeles and was living with his friend, Dennis Warwick. After learning what was taking place between the boys and me, he helped get the situation under control. He talked to the boys and let them know the situation was over and done. Unlike myself, Bobby did not have any level of patience with his brothers. He spoke to them in a way only their big brother could. It is what it is. Business is business, and bullshit is bullshit. Get over it and stop being such babies about it. Like magic, the boys begrudgingly went on with their lives. After all, there was no real reason for them to complain in the first place. Their talk with Bobby stopped them from voicing it aloud. I'm sure in the back of their minds, they were still seething and felt some type of way. Before Bobby was able to shut down their pity party, they were vocal about feeling as though they were treated unfairly by Motown, L, and me. They worked themselves into an emotional frenzy by believing L and I had let them down and were selfishly thinking about only ourselves. Their spirits were broken as they moped around, griping and declaring only Elle and I were important to Motown. They called it the Elle and Bunny Show. In their minds, if Motown depended on Elle and me, why should they be there pretending to be in harmony with us? It became apparent the division among us was becoming a very real thing. With my new salary and business manager, I was able to finally purchase a house. I also went out and purchased a brand new Buick LeSabre or LeSabre. Debarge was moving up in the world and my hard work was finally paying off. I began searching for a house high and low. It had to be in the valley since I loved it here. It did not matter if the temperature was 10 to 15 degrees hotter. I had become a San Fernando Valley girl. We hired a realtor and Fred gave him a price range. It did not take long before I found my dream home in Van Nuys. It was a 4-bedroom home with a pool and a lemon tree. It was entirely fenced in, and I liked this feature as it shut out our noisy neighbors. Inside the home were 2 fireplaces. One side of the fireplace faced the living room and was marble. The other side faced the den. Inside the den area was also a bar. I immediately fell in love with the home. We saw several houses, but this was the one. I could not believe we had our very own swimming pool and jacuzzi. I told the realtor this was the house I wanted, and he got with Fred to finish the deal. It took approximately 2 months before everything would be finalized. Finally, we were moving into our dream home. Kevin and Michelle were there to help us move in. After settling into our new home, I decided to throw a pool party and invite my family. They were all excited. Bobby even helped me with the cooking. My brother had always been an excellent cook. The pool party was fun, and I received some housewarming gifts in the process. Oh, good for them. That's so nice. Tony and I were living a happy family life and making big plans to furnish our home. We were getting along again. I thought maybe we were going to make it after all. Couples. When you say I do, you say, you know what, you are the person I am going to spend the rest of my life with. You are the person that I want to go on this journey with. I want to be there by your side through thick and thin, through good and bad. And there may be times where we have arguments. It's not even a maybe. There will definitely be times. There'll be times when we'll be angry. But there should also be times when we can look at each other and say, I'm sorry, I was wrong, or forgive me. And so as I read this book about, she left the kids with him when she had to go on a promotional tour to London. And prior to that, she's pregnant. She's hoping it's Tony's baby. And when you say, I'm sorry and forgive me, and I accept your apology and I forgive you, and vice versa, I guess you must not dwell on that thing or those things that brought you to the point where you had to say, I'm sorry, forgive me. I accept your apology, I forgive you, and vice versa. But how do you overlook? How do you move on when your husband was molesting your child and you saw it with your own eyes? And that was the second instance. The first incident, rather, was with her sister. I mean, does love do that? Uh, for me, I can't imagine. For me, speaking for me, I don't think it's that much love in the world. She hasn't talked about him going for help. You just can't put a lid on those feelings and behaviors. You gotta get some therapy and work through that shit. So, as I'm reading, I'm saying to myself, is she just that much of a mature woman, a better woman than me, if you will? Or I just don't understand. I don't get it because it, I just don't get it. And I'm trying to understand. I'm trying to be mature about this, but for me, and I think a lot of people, individuals, should feel the same way I do. There shouldn't be any forgiveness for molesting a child. And I'm not going to sit here and voice the thought that just popped in my head saying, maybe I'm wrong about it. Bullshit, I ain't wrong about it. I'm not wrong about it. And what I'm speaking about here is not that, or I don't mean, if I do sound as such, that I'm judging her. I'm just really trying to understand it and make sense. Because maybe I'm just not where I need to be in terms of forgiveness. Oh, it's just something that I am pondering. And like I said, when I read, I'm reading to you as if y'all ain't even here, and I'm reading this book alone in my bed or whatever. I'll read something and I'll stop and I'll start thinking about what I just read and trying to make sense of things. So if I was not live, this conversation, these words that are coming out of my mouth, I would have this book closed with my finger in space, in its place, where I left off. And I would just be laying there thinking all the things I just articulated to you all. So with that whole processing that I just did, for the sake of this book and because of this book, and because apparently it's not an issue for her that he molested her child, and I guess she has forgiven him, and I guess she's going to be like the Lord and put the molestation of her daughter and her sister into the sea of forgetfulness to be remembered no more, just like the Lord will do with all of our sins. And at this very moment, I'm thinking to myself, I will never, ever be able to get to that place in my spiritual journey, in my spiritual walk. There are just certain things I won't be able to put in the sea of forgetfulness and just remember it no more. More power to her, because I couldn't do it. All right, where was I? Tony and I were living a happy family life and making big plans to furnish our home. We were getting along again. I thought maybe we were going to make it after all. Kevin and Michelle were not getting along, and she voiced her frustrations to me. She was tired of the drugs, and her relationship with Kevin was going nowhere. She wanted both to get help for their addiction and threatened to leave him if he did not do something soon. I felt bad for Kevin and Michelle. I loved them both dearly and did not want to be put in a position where I felt I had to choose between them. Kevin was just as much as my friend as Michelle. I knew if Michelle ever left him, it would shatter his life. He had already gone through the pain of losing his daughter, and I knew he needed his wife now more than ever. We were all doing pills big time now. Tony and I were doing pills just as much as Kevin and Michelle. We indulged daily. I understood Michelle when she talked about how wanting to leave the drugs alone. However, as far as I was concerned, my life was not at a standstill. Perhaps I believed I was better than Michelle. How blind of me. Sure, I was moving up in the world. I had a new contract, a new home, a new car, and my children were alive and well. On the contrary, Kevin and Michelle's life was stagnant. We were both in the same boat when it came to drug use, though. When it came to the other aspects of our lives, we were in different spaces. I honestly did not know what to tell her at the time. I ended up just telling her everything was going to be all right. I told her Kevin loved her, and they both really needed each other right now. Stick with him, Michelle, I told her. I do not think he can make it without you right now. I do not think you can make it without him either. You guys need to make it. You guys need to make a baby. A baby will calm things down and make life better. Michelle responded by stating, I think it's over, Bunny. I really do. I gave Kevin a month to make a choice to better our lives. I told him if he does not at least try, I am gone. I could hear in her voice she was serious. I had to talk to Kevin about his relationship to see how he was feeling, and maybe I could say something to help. One thing I knew for sure, we all needed to take a long, hard look at how the drugs may have been impacting our lives. Like Michelle, I was sick of the drugs too. And by now, my drug issues had gone too far and for too long. I could not remember the last time Tony and I even thought about quitting. Every time we got to the point of wanting to quit, something would happen in our lives to thrust us back into the throes of addiction. It was no longer fun. I finally began to consider my children and wondered if they may be affected by our problem. And by now, I was not even hiding it. My girls are older now and could see my pain. They knew I was self-medicating. They had no idea I had a drug problem. Our home, replete with drugs, was a normal way of life. None of us was telling them at the time their mother was on drugs and something was wrong. They wanted for nothing and had a roof over their heads. I showered them with every material thing they wanted. I was involved in their school functions, and they were doing well academically. And when I thought about how my children viewed our life, they truly did not know any other way. Then there was Mama. My mother knew about my problem. Despite everything, she was my mother and very involved in her adult children's lives. Sometimes her presence would be encouraging. At other times, her presence would be overbearing and domineering. It had gotten to the point in my addiction where I was sick and tired of hurting, not so much from the drugs, but from the burden of my childhood. And during these moments, I would reach out to my mother. I would call her often in tears about what was bothering me. Memories were haunting me day and night. It became hard to shake the flashbacks. I would call her mommy as if I were a little girl, and she would respond by saying, I was acting like an immature little girl. I just wanted to talk about my childhood and how it was affecting me as an adult. And Mama had no patience with me. She was not interested in listening to any words coming out of my mouth. She was impatient and dismissive. Her attitude toward me would hurt my feelings and make me feel ashamed for not being strong enough. Mama would always equate my feelings to being high and out of my mind. She accused me of only feeling this way when I was high. In her opinion, this was the only time I wanted to talk about my childhood. This bothered me a great deal because the pain I felt was real. She was my mother and should have been a listening ear. Her indifference made matters worse. Mama was using my lifestyle to diminish my hurt and say it was not real. In her opinion, I was only bringing up my childhood because I was high. Let bygones be bygones, she would often state. It is water under the bridge, she would state at other times. Mama wanted to believe had, Mama wanted to believe had I not been high, I would not be bringing up the past. However, when I reached out to her, I was never drunk out of my mind, talking crazy, or hallucinating. I was talking about what happened to me. I was trying to figure out why my life was such a contradiction. I had everything I could ever dream of: a singing career, a husband, my children, a new home, a new car, and God. What was I covering up? And why was I feeling so ashamed? I was hiding and did not need to hide. What I needed was to talk about my feelings right then and there and process the hurt. I also needed Mama to listen to my heart. Yes, I would be under the influence of pills, and perhaps this did give me the courage to discuss the past. But because I had not dealt with the pain in my childhood, it was where I was stuck in life. To be quite candid, I was high most of the time. For Mama to use my lack of sobriety as a reason to be dismissive was unfair. I did not remember the last time I was sober. The hurting child in me looked to Mama to be Christ-like. I wanted her to meet me where I was, sober or not. This was not asking a lot, considering all the decisions I was forced to make during my childhood to appease her and Daddy. And even though I was abusing pills, it had nothing to do with what had happened to me as a child. The pills only numbed my feelings and made hearing Mama's rejection a bit more tolerable. I was desperately reaching out to my mother, and she was callously turning me out. Perhaps I should have been reaching out to God instead. Only He was willing to meet me in my mess. Like any heartbroken child, I wanted my mama to save me. Now, alas, the secret to my salvation was hidden deep within my soul and buried under the weight of an abusive and neglectful childhood. And Mama refused to see me as a genuine person. She exploited my drug problem in a way to define me as simply talking out of my head. This bothered me considerably. Mama knew the truth of my painful childhood, and she was not being real about what I had gone through. I was not talking out of my head. I could not stand when she said this to me. It only made me want to medicate even more. She used the excuse that I never wanted to talk about anything when I was sober. What did she mean by saying I did not want to talk about my childhood when I was sober? To me, talking about my pain when I was sober was not an option. When I was sober, I would be so glad about our relationship. I did not mess it up by talking about anything that made her uncomfortable. I enjoyed having a mother to spend time with, laugh with, and enjoy my life. We had tender moments and I cherished them deeply. However, the hurt and pain was still very present, just waiting to resurface at the right time. I would be hanging with my mother, faking it and pretending I was okay. I would be enjoying her as much as resenting her for what happened to me. I did not understand why she would always not be the same toward me. The time she knew I was not using the pills, she would be a loving mama toward me and treat me with civility. She would want me around, and I felt a part of her life. Only thing, I was not revealing to her my true feelings. It was difficult to deal with Mama because I did not want her to take her love away. However, I wanted to talk with her, get everything out in the open, and really begin to enjoy her in my life. I was tired of being high and wanted to be able to deal with my life. Also wanted to be heard and wanted Mama to listen to me about everything eating at my soul. But Mama's love, but Mama's love for me appeared conditional. Not only was Mama not listening to me, but Tony was avoiding me as well. He had begun to not take me seriously either whenever I confided in him regarding my childhood. He took it as though I did not know what I wanted out of life because I was high. Why were my feelings being dismissed by two very important people in my life? Michelle was right all along. We all needed to look at our lives. We had already lost Renee, and this should have made us all step back and re-examine our lives. And alas, we were all out of control, including the boys. Our lives had become like the domino effect. One thing after the other was happening to each of us. And as soon as one person was over one hurdle, another stumbled. My brothers' lives were filled with pain they could not quite deal with as well. We had no example of how a stable, healthy home life looked. We had no idea how to be mothers or fathers. We were going through life like a fish out of water. No one taught us how to take care of business. Our childhood was a complete mess. I never even remember doing homework. The importance of education was not stressed at all in our home. We never prepared for or planned for our futures. There were never talks about where we should go and what we should do. Our home life was abnormal. All we saw was Daddy fighting Mama. We stayed glued to one another and did our best to help one another get through one difficult moment at a time. Now, there was division among us, and we did not know how to handle it. All we ever had was one another, and now we were hurting one another. We did not know why, but it only made us self-medicate even more. All right, so that was chapter 39 through chapter 41. Let me look at 42. You know what? Give me a couple of minutes. I'll read chapter 42. You know how I do. Sometimes, gotta give your eyes a break and stuff. So, how's everybody doing? Please hit the like button. Thank you. If you care to donate to the Jumanji and Diva Stainless Steel Cage Fund, I'd greatly appreciate it. If you do not know, Jumanji and Diva are my two Amazon parrots. Jumanji just turned 25 on July 1st. I've had him since he was 5 months old. Diva, I've had her since 2011. They told me she was a year old when I purchased her. It's a lie. I have no idea how old Diva is. But Jumanji, I do know. And so I would love to get them a stainless steel cage. And I figured it would be helpful if people would donate out of the kindness of their heart to Madam Whipass on the $sign. That is my Cash App right there. And if you would be so kind to do so, if you have been enjoying me reading this book, even $1 would help. You know, I'm in no rush to buy one, but I'm sure I will meet my goal. If you wish to contact me, you can email me at madamwhipass7 at gmail.com. Madam Whipass and the number 7 at gmail.com. And what else? If you're listening to me, I really wish you would just come in the chat and say hello. I love meeting new YouTubers, new people. And that's real. I want to get to know you. I want you to get to know me. It's all good. Because don't you know that love is in need of love today? Don't delay. Send your love in right away. Because don't you know that hate is going around, breaking many hearts? Yeah, stop it, please, before it's gone too far. I missed the verse. Hate's going on, breaking many hearts. Ooh, I don't know. Whatever. I'm drinking some kind of wine. It's a sweet wine. Whatever. Okay, I'm getting back to the reading. Chapter 42, Elle's Burden. We were to be in the studio and begin working on our next album. There was so much division and infighting among the group. Elle was still the only one in the group not getting high, and he barely had any dealings with us. He was carrying on without our input. There were times Elle would be in the studio and we would have no clue. There was a lot of pressure on him to create another successful album. He had to fight with Motown alone while the rest of us did our best to stay mentally sane. And although we were hurting, we loved one another very much. We all had a part to play in one another's lives and a special place in one another's hearts. People on the outside saw our love for one another and would marvel at our show of affection. Our love would draw people to us. They wanted to be around us just to feel our love. Now the love we had for one another, where we could lift one another up without even speaking a word, had become our downfall. Elle loved us dearly. He had spiritual insight into each of his siblings' lives. Elle must have seen our downward spiral and was doing everything in his power to save the group. Motown was riding his back and in his ear. He must have felt a tremendous burden to save the ship. I know my brother loved us, and I would not intentionally do anything to harm the family. Not, I'm sorry, and I'll read it again. I know my brother loved us and would not intentionally do anything to harm the family. However, Satan was now roaming free in our lives, and Elle had some tough decisions to make. Because of this, the time was ripe for Motown to plant ideas of going solo in Elle's ear. Rather than the rest of us taking heed and refocusing on the group, we became preoccupied with hurting one another. Our expectations for one another was high, but also breaking us down. The boys were tripping and bad. They did not understand what was going on with Elle and why he had become so distant. Once again, they went on and on about how Elle was Motown star and they were being dragged along. Neither of them were being cooperative with Elle. They no longer cared, and their actions spoke louder than words. They became a nightmare in the studio. What they were doing to Elle was unfair. My heart went out to him, and I was on his side. Sadly, he did not know this because he had stopped talking to me. I could only trust he was doing what he felt was best for Debarge. I understood the pressure he was under with the company as well as his family. I was depending on him to come through for our next album project. I figured if he needed help, he would send for me. Therefore, I trusted him to make all the right decisions. As I began to reconcile my personal and professional relationship with Elle, a call came from Grand Rapids, and it was Mama. Your brothers Tommy and Chico were in a terrible car accident, she stated, frantic. Chico is fine. However, pray for Tommy. He might lose his hand. Oh, Mama, what happened? They were on their way back from Detroit, and they got as far as Lansing when the car went out of control. They are blessed. They could have been dead, Bunny. They totaled the car. I pray Tommy does not lose his hand, but at least God spared his life. He goes into surgery tomorrow morning. Therefore, get with your brothers if you can find them. You guys need to have a family prayer. I promised Mama I would gather the family together and pray. Immediately after hanging up, I was on the phone with my brothers. Elle already knew about the car accident and was also getting in touch with his brothers. They all came to my house and we prayed for Tommy. I also prayed for Ducky. She had recently given birth to a baby girl whom they named Marina. The last time I talked to Ducky, she was so excited about her brand new baby girl. I thank God for sparing Tommy's life. Despite Tommy living on the edge, I knew he was not ready to die. In fact, none of us wanted to die trapped in our present state. Therefore, I prayed to God to keep a hedge of protection around us and cover us with the blood of Jesus. I asked God to love us until we were able to love ourselves. I cried out to God to help us. I felt his presence right there in my bedroom. I asked him to forgive us and to see us through this dark moment. I knew God was real and I knew he was the way, the truth, and the light. Do not let us die like this. Do not let us die like this, I cried out. Please, Lord. I do not want to be lost the rest of my life. God was truly in my home the hour I prayed for my family and cried out to him. We were all miserable, and only he could help us through. I stayed on my knees for a while just to continue feeling his presence. And as I stayed on my knees, he strengthened me. I did not want his presence to leave. Having him close felt better than the high I had earlier. I wanted to stand in the gap and pray for all my brothers' continued salvation. I was worried about each of them. Now, some of y'all just heard me read that. and some of y'all are lost on what was transpiring. So I feel led to read it over again. Despite Tommy living on the edge, I knew he was not ready to die. In fact, none of us wanted to die trapped in our present state. Therefore, I prayed to God to keep a hedge of protection around us and cover us with the blood of Jesus. I asked God to love us until we were able to love ourselves. I cried out to God to help us. I felt his presence right there in my bedroom. I felt his presence right there in my bedroom. If you don't know, now you know it's real. When she says, I felt his presence right there in my bedroom, I asked him to forgive us and to see us through this dark moment. I knew God was real. I knew he was the way, the truth, and the light. Do not let us die like this, I cried out. Please, Lord, I do not want to be lost the rest of my life. God was truly in my home the hour I prayed for my family and cried out to him. God was truly in my home the hour I prayed for my family and cried out to him. We were all miserable, and only he could help us through. I stayed on my knees for a while just to continue feeling his presence. I stayed on my knees for a while just to continue feeling his presence. That's real. If you don't know, now you know. I stayed on my knees for a while just to continue feeling his presence. As I stayed on my knees, he strengthened me. I did not want his presence to leave. As I stayed on my knees, he strengthened me. I did not want his presence to leave. Having him close felt better than the high I had earlier. I wanted to stand in the gap and pray for all my brothers' continued salvation. I was worried about each of them. Tommy's operation was successful, and we were grateful the doctors were able to save his hand. He had to undergo physical therapy, and eventually he regained the use of his hand, and I knew Tommy was concerned he would never be able to play the bass again. Learning to reuse his hand was something he had to work hard at each day. And thankfully, God saved his hand. Everyone was worried, but he made it through. Debarge's next big engagement was the Apollo Theater in Harlem, New York. Motown was hosting, and Debarge would be part of the show. The engagement was a celebration and remembrance of older recording artists. It was a happy time for Debarge. We had something to look forward to, which gave us the motivation to get clean. Also, the thought of losing our brother Tommy caused us to reevaluate our lives. We were desperately trying to do the right thing. Life seemed to be going well back home between Tommy and Ducky. They received a substantial settlement from the insurance company as a result of Tommy's accident. They bought a car and was looking to buy a house. Ducky was very excited, and finally she could live out some of her dreams of being a homemaker. I was happy for them. Perhaps perhaps now they could focus on their lives. Bobby was also planning to return to Grand Rapids to get sober. I was happy for Bobby as well. Tommy would have no problem with Bobby staying with him if needed. Tommy was always willing to share his last. But knowing Bobby, he would not dare stay with Tommy for too long. Bobby always needed his own place. Each Debarge was trying to pick up the pieces and carry on with their tortured lives. we had an upcoming show in New York at the Apollo Theater. Motown asked Elle to sing Jackie Wilson's song Lonely Teardrops as a solo. He was delighted. The powers that be were slowly but surely moving Elle away from Debarge. And although we were cleaning up our act, it no longer seemed to matter. All right, let me go to the chat real quick. James Gordon, what up? Caught a live show for show. All right, James. Hey, I'm enjoying your reading. I didn't know that birds live that long. Oh yeah, Amazons, they'll live to be at least 80 years old. And the bigger parrots, like the red ones and the blue and gold ones, they're called macaws. They can live up to 100 years. Yep. Yep, yep, yep. All right, so I guess that is it. Thank you all for tuning in. I really hope you are enjoying these readings. We're almost done. We're up to chapter 43. And there's only 55 chapters in the book. So I guess we should begin thinking about what's the next book y'all care for me to read to you. Put some suggestions in the comment section. I tell you what, let me see. I have Wendy Williams' book, the first book she wrote, like in the early 2000s. I have a big, thick Michael Jackson book, written by Randy Tabarelli or something like that. I have that book. And I think those are the only like celebrity books I have. The Wendy Williams, I have a Michael Jackson. I have the Michael Jackson book that Diane Diamond wrote about Michael Jackson. It's not a favorable book in his favor at all. And I don't care to read that. I mean, I read it already, but I wouldn't care to read that online. But I never read the other. Well, I read the Wendy Williams book. I don't mind reading that again. It's been over 20 years since I read it. But the Michael Jackson thick biography book by Randy Tabarelli or something like that, I've never read that book. So that would be brand new reading it to you all. We'll be reading this book together. And again, that's all I have. So y'all let me know what y'all want me to do. Blue Moon Revelations. Harrow? What does that mean? I guess you meant hello. Hello, Blue Moon Revelations. What else? Bear with me for a second. Let me look through this library. I may have other books that I just forgot that I had. You know how that could go. Let me see what's over here. I'm just double checking real quick. Um, Just checking. I got Barack Obama's. I haven't read this book yet. The Audacity of Hope. One second. I'm just double checking. Yeah. Okay, so I was right. That's all I have. I see Wendy's book is called The Wendy Williams Experience. That was her very first book. And I see the Michael Jackson book by Randy Taraborelli. Taraborelli, that's his name. All right, so y'all let me know, or if there's something else, any other book I will have to purchase. I don't mind. Hello, Noah's Crowley's about. I don't know what you're talking about, Blue Moon. What's Crowley's about? Crowley. Did I say anything about Crowley? That Wendy Williams, Michael Jackson. I might have threw that Diane Diamond book away because I don't see it. I probably threw it away. You know, it's amazing. Now you're probably saying, Michael Jackson was a child molester and all that. Listen, I know he had Neverland. Ty, his wife's here. Who's Ty? And his wife's here. I'm sorry, darling. It's all news old. What about Aleister Crowley? I don't have any of his books. Anyway, getting back to what I was saying about Michael Jackson. I know he had Neverland. I know you can paint that, turn Neverland into something sinister, something he created to attract children so that he could molest them. And I know it never looked right. This grown man, Michael Jackson, traveling around the world with adolescent boys and things like that. I know if Michael Jackson was not famous Michael Jackson, just pretend that if Michael Jackson lived next door to you, just your regular neighbor, not Michael Jackson superstar, just like your neighbor next door is just an average person. Let's just suppose that your neighbor looked like Michael Jackson, wasn't an entertainer. Matter of fact, he drives a city bus, but he looks like Michael Jackson. Would you let your 13-year-old boy go hang out with him all the time, all day, every day? Hell no. I know they can twist things around and make it seem like, he had all this money and he was flying boys in from other countries and this and that and the other. But I'm here to tell you the FBI has stated, and you can look it up, they had investigated, surveilled, followed Michael Jackson around for 10 years and found no evidence. Now, take the FBI out of the equation. I was suspicious because if it looks like a duck, walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, it's a duck, right? When you think about Neverland, when you think about him always hanging around with these little boys and he's a grown man, yada, 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 right? But the FBI, do you understand that the FBI can find a fart in the wind if they want to? And for them to have surveilled him for 10 years and came up with nothing, I'm talking about, I'm sure they accessed his computers. I'm sure they followed him in the States and abroad and everything else for 10 years and came up with nothing. That is the only thing that makes me know that Michael Jackson was innocent. He was found innocent in the court of law. found not guilty in the court of law. So, why did I get on a Michael Jackson tangent? I don't know. I was trying to connect it to what was going on in the book. But whatever. That's neither here nor there. All right. Blue Moon, I must say that you are a whole widow. Bye bye. The blood of Jesus. You see how the devil? I was just reading how God was moving in Bunny's life as she was on her knees feeling his presence. And here come the devil talking about Aleister Crowley. Satan, the Lord rebuke you. And everything that's not like God, the blood of Jesus, I chase you with the blood. Just like the devil. All right, I'm going to go now. I shall catch up with you all later. Thank you once again. Don't forget to donate. Madam with Bass on the $. Thank you. And don't forget to hit the like button too. Thank you. Peace.